There's a kind of silence that doesn't signal defeat. It doesn't scream. It doesn't explode. It just lands, like a soft breath in a loud room, and somehow it says more than 1,000 counterpoints ever could. This is the kind of silence we're talking about today in a powerful podcast conversation between Alex O'Connor, a well-known atheist and public thinker, and Bishop Robert Barron, a Catholic bishop and theologian. Something unexpected happens. Alex comes to the table with thoughtful, honest questions, and Bishop Barron, he doesn't just bring answers. He brings something that goes beyond logic, something that stuns. Not with cleverness, not with dominance, but with truth. The conversation begins with sincerity, not combat. Alex is calm, respectful, and genuinely curious. I want to talk about Christianity in particular, he says. We've spoken about meaning and theism broadly, but Christianity has some peculiarities. Can you summarize what you think the central message of Christianity is as opposed to other world religions? It's not a trap. It's not a jab. It's a genuine inquiry. And Bishop Barron without pause responds with one sentence that cuts right to the heart. Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. 6 words. No preamble, no hedge, just the claim at the center of everything. And with that, the room shifts. Alex presses deeper. He's not hostile, he's analytical. Is that claim about life after death? Is it about forgiveness? Or is it simply that God understands the human condition? Bishop Barron responds without flinching, yes, all of that. And then he expands. He explains that early Christians didn't just see Jesus as a moral teacher or prophet. They saw in his death and resurrection a complete descent into every human fear and a triumph over it. God entered into everything that terrifies us, he says. Pain, death, betrayal, humiliation, abandonment, injustice. It's all there on the cross. He quotes Jordan Peterson, who once said the cross is the image of suffering at its limit. But then he pivots, because for Christians, the cross isn't the end. In the resurrection, they saw that the love of God was more powerful than all of it. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a cosmic reversal. Where Rome saw shame, the church saw glory. Where the world saw defeat, God revealed victory. That's why they called it gospel. Good news. Evangelion. Alex, still curious, shifts to the implications. It seems like there's a condition here. God becomes man, is crucified, and saves us. But is this conditional on accepting that gift? It's a fair question and one that leads many into debates about hell, free will, and salvation. But Bishop Barron refuses to turn this into a technical theology exam. Instead, he says, God opens the window. He manifests his love in this utter way, but at the limit, a person can still say, I don't care. I'd rather live inside. I'd rather stay on my own terms. And here's where something stunning begins to emerge. He's not defending God with courtroom logic. He's describing a relationship. He compares it to love itself, uncoerced, always offered, never forced. That's the ground for the Christian doctrine of hell, he says quietly. It's still possible to reject even that acrobatic manifestation of divine love. God never forces himself. He offers, always. Now Alex goes practical. What does it take to accept the gift? If someone's lived a terrible life, harmed others, stolen, can they just repent in their mind? Or must they go back and make it right? And Bishop Barron, again, doesn't dodge. He affirms both the grace of forgiveness and the importance of reparation. In confession, he says, I want to know if the person is contrite. Are they sincere? Are they willing to make amends? But, he adds, grace doesn't depend on perfection. It's a response to grace, not a prerequisite. He compares it to someone in AA making a fearless moral inventory, then seeking to repair what they can. But the root isn't guilt. The root is grace. It starts with a gift. Not payment, not earning, just receiving. To drive the point home, Bishop Barron turns to one of the oldest metaphors in Christian theology, ransom. He explains that in the ancient world, people were kidnapped all the time, taken to foreign lands, left helpless, and then someone would show up, pay their debt, buy their freedom. That's what Jesus did. They experienced the risen Christ and said, I've been released, delivered from fear, from sin, from shame, from death, and this experience, this explosive sense of liberation is what gave birth to the theology we now argue about, not the other way around. Bishop Barron is clear, the experience came first, the doctrines came later, as ways to explain it. It wasn't an idea that saved them, it was a person. By now, the viewer is fully drawn in. You can feel it not just in the words, but in the energy. This isn't about winning a debate. It's about presenting reality. Two men, two worldviews, two ways of understanding what it means to be human. Alex wants to understand. He probes the logic. He analyzes the story. But Bishop Barron is trying to tell him Christianity is not a theory to master. It's a person to meet. And here's where the silence begins to grow. Not because Alex has lost, but because something deeper is rising. Something not easy to argue with. Something real. So, we arrive at the edge of a mystery. The Catholic bishop, speaking not as a scholar but as a man who has met someone, and an atheist, thoughtful and sharp, now leaning closer not to attack but to understand. There's no shouting, no viral insults, no smug takedowns, only this, a priest saying with quiet boldness that Jesus Christ is risen, and that everything changes if that's true. At this point in the podcast, Alex O'Connor has been listening more than speaking, but now he leans in. His voice is measured, respectful, even curious. So if grace is a gift, he says, if we're ransomed, forgiven, restored, what must a person do to accept it? He's pressing gently, not as a critic, but as someone mapping the edges of a worldview. He continues, if someone lives a morally awful life, does evil things, but says, I'm sorry before dying, is that enough? Do they get the same reward as the person who lived virtuously their whole life? It's a question millions have asked, and you can feel the weight of it hanging in the air. Bishop Barron doesn't dodge it. In fact, he welcomes it. Bishop Barron replies, it depends not on the timeline, but on the sincerity of the heart. The Christian tradition is clear. Even at the 11th hour, grace can flood in. He references the parable of the workers in the vineyard. Some worked all day, others showed up at the last hour. Yet all were paid the same, because what's being given, he says, is not wages. It's not justice in the transactional sense. It's a gift of divine life. Alex furrows his brow, intrigued. Is that fair? He asks. And this is the moment. Bishop Barron smiles, not defensively, but gently. No, he says. It's not fair. It's grace. And grace, by definition, is undeserved. Boom, a pause. Even Alex, ever sharp, just sits with it. Because that's the pivot. Christianity doesn't offer fairness. It offers something more dangerous. Mercy. The entire system of modern ethics, what's right, what's wrong, what's earned, is suddenly disrupted. So you're saying, Alex presses, that even the worst person could be forgiven? Bishop Barron nods. That's the scandal of the cross. Jesus forgives his executioners while they're killing him. Christianity isn't about divine bookkeeping, he adds. It's about love that refuses to stop, even when nailed down, against silence. Not the awkward kind, the holy kind, the kind that follows a truth too big to argue with. Alex now raises the natural follow-up. If grace is so vast, if God is so loving, then how can there be hell? It's not a rhetorical trap. He genuinely wants to know. How can an all-loving God allow people to suffer eternally, especially if they're just mistaken or sincerely unconvinced? This is the question many believers struggle with silently, and Bishop Barron, true to form, meets it head-on. The tradition is clear that hell is self-chosen separation from God, he begins. It's not so much God casting people away as people saying, I don't want you. I want to live on my own terms, even forever. He pauses. And love, real love, respects that choice. Alex looks intrigued but unconvinced. So you're saying people choose hell, even if they don't know it? Bishop Barron clarifies. They may not know it consciously, but every soul ultimately moves toward what it truly desires. And if it desires only itself, if it rejects God to the end, then yes, it walks into isolation. Then, he says something remarkable. God doesn't slam the gates shut. People do from the inside. Another pause. Alex doesn't answer. He's still, because now we're no longer in the realm of abstract ideas. We're at the doorway of mystery. A host asks a new question: is Christianity something you believe because it's true, or because it feels true? And Bishop Barron, again, reframes the entire discussion. It's not about feelings or blind leaps. It's about an encounter. The early Christians didn't write doctrines first. They met someone, then they tried to explain it. He continues, when you experience the risen Christ, when you encounter mercy, when you see the power of love defeat death, everything else starts to make sense. Alex raises an eyebrow. That sounds experiential, almost mystical, and Bishop Barron, without missing a beat, says it is. Christianity isn't a theory, it's a relationship with a person. That's the turn. Not just belief in a creed, but belief in a man who walked out of a tomb. From here, the conversation shifts from argument to invitation. Alex says, so what makes Christianity different from other religions? Bishop Barron answers with conviction. Every religion is humanity reaching for God. Christianity is God reaching for humanity, he explains. The incarnation, God becoming man, is the ultimate condescension of divine love. He didn't just send messages. He came. That's the shock of Christianity. Not rules, not symbols, not abstract ideals, but Jesus, who touched lepers, who wept at tombs, who washed the feet of traitors, who died forgiving the very people killing him, and then rose. And now we return to that moment. Alex sits. No retort, no counter, just stillness. The kind of stillness that isn't confusion but confrontation. He's just been handed not a proposition, but a person. Not an argument, but an invitation. And for a moment, there's nothing left to say. Not because he's lost a debate, but because he's met a depth that logic alone cannot contain. Because this moment between Alex O'Connor and Bishop Barron isn't just a podcast clip. It's a mirror. For everyone watching. For every person who's ever asked, why doesn't God show himself? Why doesn't he prove it? Why can't I see what others say they've seen? And the answer, maybe, just maybe, he already has. In that studio quiet, contemplative, you could almost hear the shifting of internal ground. Bishop Barron hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't attacked or dismantled. He simply witnessed to something personal. And Alex, he didn't storm off. He didn't scoff. Instead, he listened, and in that moment when words failed and logic paused, something deeper came forward. The still, small voice. The voice that doesn't force belief, doesn't thunder down demands, doesn't manipulate. It simply invites. Before the episode ends, Alex returns to the mic one more time. His tone has shifted. There's no edge, just honest wonder. So what should someone do if they're not convinced yet they're open? It's the most human question of all. And Bishop Barron, again, avoids prescriptions. He doesn't push him to a church or doctrine or proof. Instead, he offers this: ask. Just ask. Not for evidence, for presence. He pauses. Say, God, if you exist, if you're real, then I want to know you. Not know about you, but know you. No theological lingo, no demands, just a seed. And that seed lands, because you can tell by Alex's body language, he's not dismissing it. He's considering it. Let's be honest, this wasn't a debate that proved Christianity, but something happened. And for millions who have watched and re-watched this exchange online, the power lies not in the victory of one side, but in the vulnerability of both. A prominent atheist brought honest questions. A Catholic bishop brought honest answers, and together they created space for truth to speak, not at someone, but within them. It wasn't about dominance. It was about dignity. This is where we turn to you, the viewer, because whether you realize it or not, you're in this story too. You may be like Alex, intellectually curious, emotionally cautious, spiritually uncertain. Or maybe you're like the version of Bishop Barron from years ago, once skeptical, now aflame. But either way, the question remains, do you hear the whisper? Not the shout of culture, not the noise of theology, but the quiet pull toward the person at the center of it all. Because when it's all stripped away, the religion, the rituals, the doctrines, what's left is a man who claimed to be God, who said he came not for the righteous, but for the broken, not to burden, but to set free, and who, at the height of human rejection, uttered words no mere prophet would dare. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And then, 3 days later, he walked out of a sealed tomb. Think about that. The most important moment in history didn't begin with a speech. It began with silence. The silence of the tomb, the silence of an empty cross, and now the silence of a man stunned not because he lost an argument, but because he encountered something deeper than logic. Love, not sentimental love, but the kind that dies for its enemies, the kind that calls your name in the quiet, the kind that doesn't argue. It waits. So here's the challenge, not from Bishop Barron, not from Alex, from this story itself. Tonight, in your own way, ask, Jesus, if you're real, I want to know you, not just ideas. You don't need to have it figured out. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to even be sure. You just need to be willing to crack open the door, because he never forces himself in, but he always knocks. And if you're thinking, but I've done too much, or I'm not religious enough, or it's too late for me, remember what Bishop Barron said, even at the 11th hour, grace can flood in. It's not too late. You haven't gone too far. You're not too lost. You're exactly where grace loves to show up. In the questions, in the doubts, in the silence. So let this be your takeaway. The most powerful moment in that podcast wasn't an argument one. It was a moment of stillness, when an atheist who came to debate sat stunned by the clarity of a priest who simply pointed not to an idea but to a person. Jesus, alive, risen, reaching, still whispering, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." If this video spoke to you, share it, not to score points in a debate, but to open a door for someone who's still searching. And if you're that person, you're not alone. You don't need to prove anything, just listen, because sometimes, when all the arguments fade, the only thing left is a whisper that says, "I've always loved you, and I always will."